moving on, it's time for a LexTalk session. The topic is using technology to outsource in-house legal operations, and I would like to call up on stage Mr. Gusai AlMomani, co-founder ScaleUp firm.
So good to be back in Dubai and finally get to wear a watch. Actually, I was heading the retail technology show almost 12 hours ago in London. We were doing that with Dubai Chamber, and it's just, you know, there's certain things that you find when you travel abroad and when you see different markets like the European market, but for me it's small things such as, you know, safety seriously plays a big role for me. So my topic today is going to be split into two pieces, and I'm going to be as brief as I can. I'm going to be talking to you guys about technology in two aspects. First, how to use it, you know, in your day-to-day life as a lawyer, whether you're in-house or private practice. And the second thing is how to benefit from legal tech as a business owner, be it an entrepreneur, a CEO of an organization. And I'm going to touch on many of the topics that my colleagues, the previous speakers, just talked about. I would like to tell you about myself first. So my name is Gusai, and I'm an England and Wales qualified solicitor. So I'm registered with the SRA as a solicitor, but I believe the difference between me and most lawyers is that I have a bit of an entrepreneurial background. So I'm the co-founder of the VDEC Clinic, which is a wellness clinic based here in Dubai and has won 5 awards in the last 3 years. Thank you. So we were the health ambassador for Expo 2020. We won the Company of the Year award by Dubai Chamber twice, 21, 22. What really helps is being on the other side of the decision making as an entrepreneur versus, you know, a lawyer. It really helped me to think a little bit out of the box, right? So I started to look at my fellow, you know, business owners, service providers, companies that we deal with. And I started to pick up on some of their comments on the legal field. And I thought, what would be better if I can, you know, use some of these comments to improve the service that we're offering. I'm going to share a personal story, and this personal story is actually one of the reasons why I ventured into what I'm doing, because, you know, what I used to get asked a lot is, you know, you're a King's graduate, you are a qualified solicitor, so what made you take this career path? You know, it's not so much that you would see lawyers go on an entrepreneurial journey, so to speak. And you see, I worked for some of, I would say, mid-size and large companies. I mean, as I'm sure you're all aware, I was in MR Properties, which is the largest company here in Dubai. And I met some really fantastic people over there, and I learned through that long journey. But there was a personal story, really, that I wanted to share with you, which started this whole thing. And I was one day in the corporate head office, and there is basically a line of top executives, right? The kind of people that you need an appointment to see internally. And if you're an external supplier, it's even more difficult to sit down with that person because suddenly that person is a special VIP. And they're all lined up in one section. And they've got printers just behind their desk. So what I did is I phoned the IT and I told them I wanted access to the printers and I want to print some documents. I did that because I wanted to, you know, get a feel for how they work. And I've gotten that access, and I was randomly printing papers. What I picked on is that it was 10 a.m. and almost everybody in that room was on this device, right? And everybody was, scrolling up and down. Definitely there was some work done, but I did count almost 1.5 hours that was spent just on this device. So that kind of gave me the impression that if these are my target audience, and that's a very important thing for you, especially if you're an in-house lawyer, or I would say more if you're a private practice lawyer and you're out there looking for clients, is that you gotta select your audience. So if this is my audience, and this is what they're doing for at least an hour and a half during their day, then it means the key to your clients is sitting here, right? So this is something that I've noticed a lot of lawyers are missing out on, and it's being established in the digital sense. See, it's becoming more and more increasing nowadays, especially in an economy like Dubai, that a lot of companies set up here, they acquire some sort of funding, be it private funds, banks, VCs, you name it, and then they end up either being mid-sized, or some of them, they go off and they're unicorn successful companies. But the challenge that you'll notice with most of these entrepreneurs, young businesses that are often set up by young people, is that they're often intimidated by the impression that we leave on the profession, right? And look, the thing is, our profession, I personally believe, needs to make sense to our target audience. And so far, currently, the way the legal services are being performed are not really up to date. My previous colleagues were talking about AI and tech, and I think that's really where the challenge is. You see so many of my other fellow entrepreneurs, they genuinely believe that there is a time when they no longer have to communicate with an external lawyer. See, they look at an external lawyer as an unnecessary cost, as a cost that I would like to reduce, as a person that I no longer want. So if this is the perception that your client is receiving, then it's about time that we make a move in the profession. And it's very important to keep up with the trends of the time. You see, Machiavelli used to say, he who requires constant obedience must change his conduct with the time. So that's what I personally think that, so many of us nowadays would really need to invest time in being here. Because as a private practice lawyer or as a solo lawyer, if your goal is to generate more clientele and you don't have that, let's say, big name behind you or a large law firm supporting you, then your target audience is sitting here. It's all about how you generate the right ad, the right copy, the right message, the right structure in terms of how you bill your clients, in terms of how your billing also makes sense to your client. Because if you're sending a timesheet to a 25-year-old delivery app CEO who, by the way, may be funded better than a well-established company sometimes. Nowadays with the funds that are available from VCs, from banks, etc., the way entrepreneurs are acquiring funding nowadays is crazy. And that person, especially an entrepreneur, especially someone who comes from a, let's say, a leadership perspective, is not going to be simply handing out and just biting into any random timesheet. So I personally think, and I have this conversation a lot with lawyers, is that it's about time that what we send out makes sense, number one. And number two, it's about time that we have some sort of proper digital presence. See, in my company, we currently do that to a number of our clients. We try to find we call it a bridge between the gap that is currently present between business owners and lawyers. we understand, for example, the formalities associated with the legal profession itself, the seriousness, the nature of the language, the nature of the impression that you leave to the client eventually. But I think it's still very important that we update ourselves, that we keep with the trend, right? And I'm so glad to be, in an audience full of people from the legal profession, whether lawyers or, quasi-lawyers. I think we can all agree that nowadays it's becoming a bigger challenge to land a client, and so much time is being sometimes I would say spent on consultations, on trying to speak to that client, on trying to convert that client. And when we sit down with a person, we say that the lawyer is charging X number of fees for a consultation. Yes, maybe some organizations with proper structure will be interested in that, but the majority of I would say solo-owned businesses, entrepreneur-based businesses, will just walk out of the door. I talk a lot about entrepreneurs and solo businesses. 250,000 companies were set up in Dubai in 2020 during the height of COVID. So we're all fighting on the same cake, which is basically a set of mid-size and large companies. But how about those 250,000? Don't you think all of them require some sort of legal advice at some point? They all have contracts, they all have service providers, they all have employment disputes. But without bridging that gap with that generation, I think lawyers will eventually find themselves out of business. Because just like the previous speakers were talking about technology, AI, and I get this from a lot of my colleagues. They're always telling me, like, I'm using ChatGPT and I type service provider agreement and he drafts me a contract. So I personally believe it is coming. There is a point in time in which we will no longer be a necessity in the market unless that move is taken by, I would say, creative, edgy, and smart lawyers that would like to still keep up with the trends of time. And I understand that some people may disagree with what I said, right? But the second part that I was trying to also introduce is nowadays increasingly business owners, they also find, and I'm talking about like mid-sized, large companies, they also find a need to outsource the legal function of the company to another entity that that may provide that legal service, be it that they're professional, well insured, and capable to do the service. So, but what I personally think is that we need to capture on these two trends: the entrepreneurial trend and the outsourcing trend, which is increasingly becoming popular in Dubai, and I think even globally. Like when I speak to my colleagues in London who are lawyers in different, from Magic Circle to mid-sized firms, they're almost sharing the same story, They're doing like maybe 3 days a week in the office, and then 2 days are online or virtual. Some of them even do a fully virtual setup where the lawyer is completely working from home. And as I'm sure you guys can increasingly see, that there is a number of layoffs currently in the market from both mid-sized and large companies when it comes to the legal field. So it's very important to business owners nowadays from mid-sized and large companies to use better legal tools that help them acquire that legal advisory part or that legal representation part, but at the same time to be able to manage time, manage cost, manage resources, ensure that time is only being spent at the correct task, that there is no billing for, 5 minutes of an email or 10 minutes of a phone call, which honestly for me I mean, I come from that background, right? So when I was in London, when I qualified as a lawyer, we used to bill for an email. But it seriously never made sense for me, okay? That trend, I also personally believe is, it's increasing here in Dubai. People are catching up with it. So I think it's very important for in-house lawyers to also consider using, advanced applications to manage time, manage resources. This is something that we do in our company, but I could give you guys a presentation. I could walk you about how to join and how to subscribe and the monthly costs associated, but I think it's much better if you hear directly from me what are the reasons you should consider that versus me running you down through a corporate presentation. I'm the kind of person who likes to speak directly from the heart. And like I said, I meet with a lot of lawyers, I meet with business owners, and I think it's really about time that we all catch up, right? Because if we are not going to be catching up with the trends that are happening nowadays, then you never know what's going to happen to our field. Our respected colleague here was talking about, he mentioned something really interesting, his observation. He said that the legal work will always remain the same. It's only the tool that you're using. I 100% agree with that. But then that tool, I personally believe, is in danger. It's us, because we're the tool. Yeah? So when we file a legal case, it's a human behind the counter. It's a lawyer behind that timesheet. It's a person. So you're offering your talent, your brain, your service. There's not really any machine working in the background. So I personally think, again, I keep stressing on this, it's about time for us to get a proper update. Now, if you guys had any questions from your end, I'd be happy to answer them. I really apologize for all of you who has sent me an email to me. Like I said, I was on the plane and I had an overnight flight, so I will be getting back to everybody who emailed me. But then again, thank you so much for coming here and thank you. Does anybody have a question? I'll take that as a no. Okay, thank you guys.